My darlings, before I speak another word, let me give you a warning. This story is not gentle. It may sound like just another tale of a grandmother being mistreated by her family, but I assure you, what happened that Christmas still keeps me awake at night. It was the year my own flesh and blood replaced me with a stranger, a year that should have broken me completely, and yet it became the year I gave them a final gift that shattered their greed. So lean close to me, my dear listener, and let the firelight of my words warm you. If you feel my heart beating inside this story, then please, stay with me until the end. And if you find yourself gripped by my voice, don't forget to subscribe, like and share these words, so that others too may know what it means to be betrayed, and to rise above it. It was early December when I first sensed the change. The world outside was already silver and white, the hedgerows dusted with frost, the ground crisp beneath the soles of my slippers. When I stepped out to fetch the milk, I remember gazing at the garden, the roses long dead for the winter, and thinking, Christmas will be different this year. I didn't know why I thought it, only that the air felt heavier, colder, as if even the house itself was bracing for something unwelcome. My son Edward came to visit that Sunday afternoon. Just as the bells of St. Mary's rang in the distance, he walked in briskly, shaking the frost from his coat. But he did not look at me the way he used to. His eyes were hard, distracted, almost as though being here was an obligation, not a joy. Behind him, Clarissa followed, her perfume strong enough to smother the scent of the pinewood fire. She never liked this house. Too quaint, she called it, too dusty, but it was mine, and had been for 50 years. I busied myself with tea, but when I placed the tray before them, I noticed Edward hadn't even removed his coat. My heart sank a little, though I tried to ignore it. It's getting so chilly, isn't it? I said softly, hoping for some warmth in return, but Edward cleared his throat. Mother, we've been thinking about Christmas this year. My heart lifted for a moment. Perhaps he wanted to celebrate here again, as we always had. I could already see the table, the silver cutlery, the plum pudding, the fire crackling while the children tore open their stockings. My hands itched to polish the ornaments Edward himself had made as a boy. Little stars cut out of tin foil that still glimmered with childish pride. Yes, dear, I asked, folding my hands in my lap. He looked at Clarissa, then back at me. His jaw tightened. We think it's best if someone else takes over this time. I laughed softly, confused. Takes over? Takes over what? The Christmas dinner, Clarissa said quickly, in her clipped, impatient voice. It's too much for you now at your age. The house, the food, the guests. It's a lot to manage. My chest tightened. I've always managed before, I whispered, but they did not seem to hear me. We've found someone, Edward continued, staring into the fire instead of at my face. A woman. She's a professional. She'll handle the cooking, the hosting. That way you can rest. Rest. Oh, that cruel little word. Rest was what you told the old, the useless, the forgotten. Rest was what you said when you no longer wanted someone to be part of life's busy joys. I forced a smile, though my insides were trembling. Of course, dear, I said softly, if you think it best. But in that instant, something inside me shifted. Not anger, no, something colder. I realized then that to my son, I was no longer the heart of Christmas. I was a burden to be hidden, a tired relic better placed in the shadows, while strangers filled my place. Tell me, my dear listener, if you were in my position, how would you have felt? Would you have raged, slammed your fist on the table, demanded to be seen? Or would you, like me, have swallowed the pain quietly, while inside, something new began to burn? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I need to know if I am alone in this pain, or if others too have felt invisible in the eyes of those they loved most. The days passed in a blur. Where once the house would be alive with the bustle of baking and decorating, now there was silence. My hands longed to knead dough, to press cloves into oranges, to hang garlands across the mantel. But instead, I sat in my armchair, a shadow in my own home, while Edward and Clarissa spoke of this Maggie who would soon arrive. And then, she did. Margaret, though they all called her Maggie. She was tall, graceful, with glossy hair and a voice like honey dripping from a spoon. But her eyes were sharp, calculating. The moment she stepped into my kitchen, she looked around as though she owned it. "Oh, how quaint," she said, opening cupboards without asking, moving my crockery, rearranging the very space where my memories lived. "This will do nicely," she said at last, smiling at Edward and Clarissa. "I'll take care of everything, everything." That word again. Everything I had poured my life into. The Christmases I had built year after year, the traditions, the little rituals that meant so much to me. All of it was being handed to a stranger, while I was expected to fade quietly into the background. But I did not protest. I watched. I waited. Because, my dear listener, there was something Maggie, and indeed my son and his wife, did not know. This house, my house, was built with secrets. My late husband and I had hidden things here, treasures of memory and of worth. Letters, keepsakes, even wealth we had tucked away for safekeeping. For years, I had intended to reveal it one day, as a gift for my family, my final Christmas gift. But now that gift would change. It would not be theirs to devour greedily. It would become something far, far more powerful. On the night before Christmas, when the house lay silent and heavy with sleep, I wandered the halls. Maggie was asleep in the guest room. Clarissa snored beside Edward down the hall. The Christmas tree twinkled faintly in the darkness, its lights glowing like watchful eyes. I pressed my wrinkled hands against the cold plaster walls and whispered to the house itself, "They think I am nothing, but tomorrow they will see." And in that whisper, I felt the strength of years, the weight of memory, the pulse of something greater than myself. The stage was set. My dear friends, if you are still with me, I must ask you, would you have stayed silent as I did, biding your time, or would you have fought then and there? Your voices matter, and I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you long to know what happened on Christmas Day, the moment when the stranger in my home and my family's own greed collided with my final gift, then subscribe and stay close. Because what comes next is not just a twist. It is the shattering of everything they thought they knew. Christmas morning arrived with a silence that felt wrong. In the old days, I would rise before dawn, stirring batter for Yorkshire puddings, while the radio played faint carols in the background. I would hum along, my hands steady, my heart brimming, with joy at the thought of my family gathering in this house, my house, for a day of love and togetherness. But that Christmas, I was told not to lift a finger. The kitchen, once my kingdom, was forbidden to me. When I shuffled toward it in my slippers, Maggie blocked the doorway with her tall frame. "Oh no, dear," she said, all false sweetness. "You just rest. I'll handle it. Rest." Always that word. I smiled faintly, though inside I screamed. My hands curled against my robe, aching to touch the flour, the butter, the rolling pin my mother had given me on my wedding day. But I turned away, forcing myself back toward the parlor, where the fire burned low and weak, as though even it had lost its will to blaze. Edward and Clarissa arrived soon after, their arms laden with parcels wrapped in shimmering gold and silver. "Merry Christmas, Mother," Edward said, kissing my cheek, as though out of duty rather than affection. Clarissa handed me a small neat package. "Something for you," she said briskly, before hurrying off to praise Maggie's arrangement of the table. I sat with the gift on my lap, unwrapping it slowly. It was a scarf. Fine, expensive, but impersonal. No thought, no memory, no warmth of love behind it. Just a gesture, a box ticked, a duty fulfilled. I pressed it to my lips nonetheless, whispering a thank you they did not even hear. The house began to fill. Nieces, nephews, neighbors. They all filed in, their eyes widening at the lavish spread Maggie had prepared. Gleaming roasts, golden pies, bowls of steaming vegetables. Everything arranged with perfection. She walked among them like a queen, her laughter loud, her smile radiant. And I sat in the corner chair by the window, forgotten. Some nodded politely to me, but no one lingered. To them, I was part of the furniture, a relic too delicate to touch. My heart ached with every burst of laughter that did not include me, every bite of food prepared by hands that were not mine. I felt like a ghost haunting my own Christmas. And yet, my dear listener, I was not defeated, for beneath the sorrow, beneath the humiliation, there was a secret burning quietly. My final gift, my hidden truth. They thought they had erased me from Christmas, but they had no idea that the day would end with their greed shattered in pieces. Maggie, meanwhile, grew bolder. She paraded around the table, pouring wine into crystal glasses, boasting about her touches. She even leaned down and whispered in Clarissa's ear, loud enough for me to hear, "I do hope you'll consider me again next year." It seems the old ways were getting a bit stale. My traditions, my food, my Christmas, all dismissed as stale. Clarissa laughed, her shrill voice cutting through me. Yes, darling, I couldn't agree more. Honestly, this is the first Christmas I've truly enjoyed here. Everything feels so modern. My fingers dug into the arm of my chair until my nails hurt. I wanted to rise, to shout, to slam my fists on the table, but instead, I remained still, silent, watching, because silence, I realized, has its own kind of power. When the meal was done, Edward rose to make a toast. He clinked his glass, cleared his throat, and raised his wine high. "To family and to new traditions," he said, his eyes darting toward Maggie with gratitude. Everyone cheered, glasses clinked, and me, I lifted mine only half-heartedly, my lips whispering words I did not mean. New traditions. How easily they erased me. After the toast, gifts were exchanged. I gave Edward and Clarissa what they expected. A modest parcel wrapped in plain paper. Inside were socks, knitted by my tired hands. They smiled politely, then set them aside without a second glance. Maggie gave them wine, rare and expensive. Their eyes lit up at her gift, in a way they never had for mine. I watched it all, each smile twisting the knife deeper into my chest. But they did not see that beneath my chair, my hand rested on the small brass key tied to a ribbon around my wrist. That key, oh my darlings, that key was my strength. It opened a place in this house no one knew existed, a place where my husband and I had hidden not just money, but letters, documents, and a truth so sharp it could cut through any amount of greed. I sat quietly, sipping from my glass, my heart steadying as the plan solidified. I would not reveal it yet, not while laughter still rang falsely in these walls. No, I would wait until their greed was at its loudest, their arrogance at its peak, and then I would show them what they had thrown away. My dear listener, I know your heart must be pounding now, as mine did that day. Can you imagine being replaced, in your own home, at your own table, by a stranger who wore your crown of tradition? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have endured as I did? Or would you have spoken out? Your voice matters to me, because when mine was ignored, it was the thought of someone like you, listening one day, that gave me strength. And so, as the day wore on and the firelight flickered against the windows, I waited. I waited while they laughed, while they sang, while Maggie basked in their praise. But inside me, the storm grew, because Christmas was not yet finished, and neither was I. My dear friends, you must understand, Christmas did not end with the clinking of glasses and the emptying of plates. For them, yes. For Edward, for Clarissa, for all the guests and that woman Maggie. The day had already been declared a triumph, but for me, the true Christmas had not yet begun. I sat in my old chair by the window, as the sky outside deepened from grey to black, the garden frosted white beneath the moonlight. I could hear the laughter still bubbling from the dining room, laughter that used to belong to me, laughter that once rose because of the meals I cooked, the songs I led, the warmth I gave, and yet, now it rang out for someone else. I closed my eyes and remembered the first Christmas I had ever hosted here. My husband, God rest his soul, had carried in a great sack of coal to feed the fire, and Edward, no older than 5, had toddled behind him with an ornament clutched in his little hand. He had said, "Mummy, it's the brightest Christmas because of you." Those words had burned themselves into my heart forever. And now my son praised another woman's cooking, another woman's decorations, while I sat forgotten, invisible, but not powerless. For in my lap, beneath the folds of my dress, I clutched the brass key. My fingertips caressed its edges, remembering how my husband had pressed it into my palm the year before he died. "Keep it safe," he had whispered. "One day it will mean more than you know." Oh, how right he had been. Maggie passed me once, carrying a tray of sweet puddings. She leaned down, her perfume cloying, her smile stretched too wide. "Are you comfortable, dear?" she asked, as though I were a fragile guest in my own house. "Yes," I replied quietly, but my eyes held hers for just a second too long, and I saw it, the flicker of unease, for Maggie, confident as she was, did not like the way I looked at her. She was used to people praising her, bending beneath her charm, but I did not bend. I watched, and she knew it. The hours drifted. Guests grew drowsy, their laughter softening, their voices slurring with wine. Children fell asleep on sofas, wrapped in blankets. Clarissa clutched her pearls and sighed happily, saying, "This is the loveliest Christmas we've ever had." "Maggie, you've outdone yourself," Edward nodded, his arm draped lazily around her shoulders. "Yes, new traditions suit us well." Those words struck me like a hammer. New traditions. To them, I was not tradition. I was obsolete. And yet, what is Christmas without its roots? Without memory? Without the very hands that built it in the first place? My dear listener, I ask you again, have you ever been cast aside by the very people who should have cherished you? If you have, then you know the sting that burned through my veins that night. Tell me in the comments, for your words will be heard, even if mine were ignored. At last, the house began to quiet. Guests drifted away into the cold night, their carriages crunching over the frosted road. Maggie tidied the table, humming some tune that grated against my bones. Clarissa and Edward retired to the guest rooms upstairs, full of food and drink, their bellies warm with comfort that I had not provided. And still, I sat in my chair, waiting. When the house had finally stilled, I rose. My joints ached, my bones protested, but my resolve was strong. I lit a single candle and walked down the hallway, my slippers whispering against the wooden floorboards. The air felt thick with secrets, as though the walls themselves held their breath. I stopped before the library door. Oh, how many hours I had spent in that room, surrounded by books and memories. With trembling hands, I slid the brass key into the lock of a panel behind the shelves. It clicked softly, a sound I had not heard in years, a sound that sent shivers racing up my spine. The panel swung open to reveal a narrow staircase, descending into the earth. My candlelight flickered against the stone walls. casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me. Slowly, carefully, I made my way down. At the bottom lay a room no one else in that house knew existed. My husband and I had built it long ago, when times were uncertain, when whispers of war and ruin floated in the air. Inside were chests of oak, lined with velvet, filled with what little fortune we had saved. Sovereign coins, jewelry passed down through generations, bonds and deeds of the land. But those were not the most precious things. No, the true treasure lay in the letters. Letters Edward had written as a boy, telling me how he loved me more than anything in the world. Letters my husband had written on our wedding night, promising me a life of devotion. Photographs, trinkets, all the memories that made this house alive. I sank to my knees before the chest and opened it. My fingers traced over each item, my tears falling onto the papers. "They don't remember," I whispered. "But I do. I always have." And then I made my decision. If my family wanted new traditions, if they wanted to replace me with a stranger, then so be it. But before this Christmas ended, they would know who I truly was. Not a burden, not an old relic, but the keeper of everything they held dear, and everything they had forgotten in their blind greed. I gathered the letters, the deeds, a handful of coins. I placed them into a small wooden box my husband had carved for me long ago, and I carried it back up into the house, the weight of it pressing into my chest like a heartbeat. By the time I returned to the parlor, the fire was low, the house quiet. Only Maggie remained, humming softly as she polished the silver. She turned when she saw me, her eyes narrowing at the box in my arms. "What's that, dear?" she asked, her voice too casual. I smiled faintly, lowering myself back into my chair. "Oh, just a little something for my family. A final Christmas gift." Her smile wavered. For all her confidence, something in her eyes betrayed fear. Fear that perhaps the old woman she thought so weak was not finished after all. And she was right. The night was not yet over. The box sat heavy on my lap, its oak edges pressing against my knees, its weight more than wood and coin and paper. It was the weight of history, of promises, of love and sacrifice, of everything this house was built upon. And yet, as I cradled it like a child, the woman across the room, Maggie, watched me with thinly veiled suspicion. She paused in her polishing, her hand still on the silver candlestick, her head tilted like a crow, scenting something shiny it might steal. "A final gift, you say?" Her voice was smooth, but her eyes betrayed a restless hunger. I stroked the lid of the box with trembling fingers. "Yes, a gift for my family, something they've long forgotten." Maggie's smile tightened. "How thoughtful of you. Though I must say, you've given them plenty already today. Your presence, your blessing. That should be enough." I looked at her, meeting her gaze without blinking. "And yet it is not. They did not come here for blessings, Maggie. They came for what they always come for. More." Her lips parted as though to protest, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned away, stacking cutlery, her back stiff. I let the silence stretch between us, thick as the frost outside. For in that silence, I could hear her unease. She did not like that I still held something she did not control. At last, she spoke again, her tone lighter, forced. "Well, I do hope you don't overexert yourself. We wouldn't want you tiring. Not tonight." "Tiring?" I whispered, my voice low, steady. "No, my dear, I've been resting long enough." Her hands faltered for the briefest second. Then she swept past me toward the kitchen, her skirts brushing the floor, but I saw it in her eyes before she left. She would not sleep easy tonight. I remained in the parlor, the box resting against me, the fire crackling weakly, as the last embers fought to survive. I did not move for a long time. I let the weight of what I carried seep into my bones, steadying me. Tomorrow when the sun rose, everything would change. But change, it seemed, would not wait until morning. for not an hour later, I heard the creak of the stairs. Edward appeared in the doorway, his dressing gown pulled tight, his hair tousled with sleep. "Mother, what are you still doing awake?" His eyes dropped to the box in my lap. I smiled faintly. "Just thinking. About Christmases past, about things long hidden." He frowned, stepping closer. "What's that?" "Memories," I whispered. "Memories and more." His brow furrowed. "Mother, you shouldn't burden yourself with things like that. You're not well enough." Not well enough. There it was again. That tone, that dismissal. I had been strong enough to raise him. Strong enough to keep this house alive through winters of hunger and grief. Strong enough to bury my husband and still rise every morning. And yet to him, I was weak. I tightened my grip on the box. "Perhaps you underestimate me, Edward." His eyes flickered with irritation. "Mother, listen to me. You don't need to prove anything. You've done enough. Let us handle things now." I almost laughed. Handle things? They had replaced me, erased me, and still he dared to say it kindly, as though he were doing me a mercy. My heart burned with sorrow and pride all at once. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice sharp enough to still him where he stood. "Tomorrow, when all are gathered, I will show you, all of you, and then we shall see who truly understands Christmas in this house." He blinked, startled by the steel in my voice. For a moment, I saw the boy he once was, the boy who feared disappointing his mother. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold man his wife had shaped. He nodded stiffly, muttered, "Very well," and left me alone again. The house sank back into silence. Yet I knew, even as I stared into the dying fire, that neither Edward nor Maggie would sleep easily that night. They had glimpsed the storm in my eyes, and storms cannot be ignored. At dawn, the house stirred once more. Maggie was first, of course, sweeping into the kitchen as though she had lived here all her life, humming her irritating tune. Clarissa emerged, draped in silk, yawning delicately, her pearls catching the early light. Edward followed, his eyes shadowed, his jaw tight. I sat at the head of the table, the box before me. My hands rested on its lid, steady, calm. The children tumbled in, rubbing sleep from their eyes, their little voices piping with excitement. They did not notice the tension thick in the air, nor the way their parents glanced nervously at the box. When all were gathered, I rose. My bones ached, but I stood tall, my voice clear as a bell. "Merry Christmas, my family. Merry Christmas," they echoed, though uneasily. I tapped the lid of the box with my wrinkled hand. "Before this day goes further, before you drown yourselves in wine and gifts that mean nothing, I have something to share." Maggie stepped forward slightly, her smile stretched thin. "Really, dear, perhaps after breakfast." "No," I cut her off, my eyes flashing. Now, the room fell silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting, sensing something in my tone. Slowly, I opened the box. The scent of cedar and paper drifted into the air. I drew out the first letter, Edward's, written when he was only 7 years old. The paper was crinkled, the ink smudged by childish hands. I held it high for all to see. "My dearest Mummy," I read aloud, my voice trembling but strong. "You are the best mummy in the whole world. When I grow up, I will buy you a palace made of sweets, and we will never be sad again. Love, Edward." A hush fell over the table. Edward's face drained of color. Clarissa's smile froze. Maggie's eyes darted between them, confused, unsettled. I laid the letter on the table and lifted another, a photograph, faded but clear. Edward on his father's shoulders, both of them laughing, the Christmas tree behind them sparkling. I placed it beside the letter. Then another, a deed to the land, signed by my husband, worth more than Maggie's entire lifetime of service. And then coins, glittering in the light, spilling onto the table like drops of frozen sunlight. Gasps rose from around the room. The children's eyes widened. Clarissa reached forward greedily, but I snapped the lid shut before her hand could touch another coin. "This," I said, my voice steady, echoing through the stunned silence, "is my gift, not to be squandered, not to be stolen, not to be claimed by strangers, or by those blinded by greed. This is the soul of this family, the memory of what we once were. And today, you will remember it." My gaze swept across them all. Edward pale and trembling, Clarissa clutching her pearls, Maggie stiff as stone. "You thought you could replace me," I whispered. "You thought I was nothing, but I am the keeper of everything you are, and you will never forget that again." The room held its breath, and for the first time in many years, I saw fear in their eyes, not of me perhaps, but of the truth I had unearthed. Christmas had only just begun. The silence after my words stretched so long that even the clock on the mantelpiece seemed hesitant to tick. The children, wide-eyed, clutched their napkins, as though sensing that the air in the room was charged with something greater than they could understand. Edward was the first to break. His voice cracked with a desperation he hadn't yet shown. "Mother, where did you get all of this?" I looked at him, unblinking. "Where do you think? This is the house your father built, Edward. His sweat, his blood, his endless nights in the fields. He saved, he hid. He kept aside what he could for the family he loved. And I kept it safe. Safe from storms, from hunger, from time itself. Safe for the day when it would be most needed." Clarissa leaned forward, her fingers twitching toward the coins, though she dared not touch them, with me watching. Her voice was saccharine, yet sharp underneath. Why didn't you tell us before? We've struggled, we've planned, I cut her off. "Struggled? You parade in pearls, Clarissa. You've not struggled a day in your life since marrying my son. And even in your comfort, you dared to erase me, to tell me my chair was no longer mine, my presence a burden. And now you ask why I did not tell you. Perhaps because I saw the hunger in your eyes long before this morning." Her cheeks flushed crimson. She leaned back stiffly, clutching her pearls as though they could shield her from my truth. Edward's gaze darted to the box again. "But mother, why now? Why reveal it all today?" I drew a deep breath, my hands steady on the oak lid. "Because today I was replaced. Today I was reminded that to you, I am but an old woman wasting air. Today, in my own home, at my own Christmas table, I was made to feel as though I did not exist. So yes, Edward, today felt right. The room stirred like a hive. The children whispered. Maggie shifted uncomfortably. Clarissa's nails clicked against her pearls. Finally, Maggie spoke. Her voice careful, too careful. You're saying you've had this all along. Letters, deeds, gold. And you kept it secret, even from your son." "Yes," I said simply, "because it was never his to squander. It was ours. Mine, his father's, and the children's yet to be born. But not yours, Maggie, never yours." Her eyes hardened, her mask slipping for the briefest moment. "You speak of greed, yet you hoarded all this in silence. Perhaps you are not so different." The words stung, though I did not let it show. Perhaps she was right in one way. I had hoarded it, yes, but not for myself, for them, for the family who, in their blind selfishness, could not even see the love behind my secrecy. Edward slammed his hand on the table suddenly, making the children jump. "Enough of this. Mother, this is madness. These coins, these papers, they need to be handled properly, invested, divided fairly." His eyes flashed to Maggie, then Clarissa, then back to me. "You can't possibly think divided." My voice cracked like a whip. "You speak as though this is spoils from war. These are not tokens to be cut into pieces. They are proof of who you are, Edward. Proof of where you come from. And yet, you see only numbers." His lips trembled. "But it could change everything. Our debts, our plans, your debts, I spat, my hands trembling now, not from weakness, but from fury. Your foolish ventures, your endless need to impress, to live larger than you are, always reaching, never content, and all the while, forgetting the roots that held you. This gift is not yours to dissolve into dust. The children, sensing the fire in my voice, shrank closer together. Little Peter whispered to his sister, "Why is Grandma shouting?" And in that moment, my heart softened, for they did not yet understand the poison of greed. Clarissa reached across the table suddenly, her hand darting toward the box, but I was faster than she expected. My old fingers clamped over the lid with a strength that startled even me. "No," I hissed. "You will not touch it." Her hand froze midair, and for a moment, her carefully polished smile shattered. Her eyes glared at me with raw contempt, as though she would strike me if she dared. The room grew colder. Maggie, watching all of this, spoke again, her tone deceptively calm. Perhaps it is best, Mrs. Whitmore, if you entrust it to someone neutral, for safekeeping, so no one quarrels." I turned to her slowly, letting the silence fall heavy before I answered. "And by neutral, you mean yourself, don't you?" She stiffened, but did not deny it. I leaned closer, my voice low, sharp enough to cut. "I see you, Maggie. I've always seen you. The way you walk through these halls, as though they are yours. The way you whisper in my son's ear when you think I cannot hear. You may have replaced me at this table, but you will not replace me in this house. Not while I still breathe." Her mask slipped entirely then. The sweetness melted, and in its place was something colder, harder. "You're old, Mrs. Whitmore, old and tired. One way or another, these things will pass on. Perhaps you should let them go gracefully." The words hit like ice water. For a moment, I could not breathe. But then, deep within me, something ancient and unyielding rose. "Gracefully," I whispered. "Do you call it grace to be erased, to be discarded like dust on the mantle? No, Maggie, I will not go gracefully. I will go with thunder." The fire crackled behind me, spitting sparks as though agreeing. Edward rubbed his temples, his voice weary but sharp. "Enough, both of you. This is absurd. Mother, please, hand it over. I'll ensure it's used properly." I looked at him, my son, my flesh and blood, and for the first time in my life, I did not see the boy I raised. I saw only a man hollowed by the people around him, and my heart broke. "No," I said, my voice final, ringing through the parlor. "This is my gift, my decision, my final act in this house, and you will listen." The silence that followed was not peace, but the silence before a storm breaks. I knew then that the battle for this house had only just begun. The silence after my refusal quivered like glass about to shatter. The children stared at me wide-eyed, their forks suspended mid-air, the smell of roasted goose and cinnamon forgotten. For one trembling heartbeat, it seemed the world held its breath. Then Clarissa's voice ripped through it, sharp as a blade. "This is absurd. Edward, do you hear her? She's keeping us from our rightful inheritance, from your father's hard-earned wealth, from what should be ours." She rose from her chair, her pearls clinking like chains, her face flushed with outrage. "All these years, Edward, we've struggled to keep appearances. The clubs, the invitations, the loans, and all the while, she hoarded this under our noses. This is theft. Theft from you." Edward's hands gripped the table, knuckles white. His eyes were torn, darting between me and her, but it was clear where the pull lay. I steadied my voice, though my heart hammered. "Theft? No, Clarissa. This was protection. Do not twist love into crime. This treasure was kept for the family, for the children, for those not yet born. Not for silk gowns and champagne feasts at your endless parties." Clarissa's lips curled. "How dare you speak to me like that, you bitter old woman? You sit here, clinging to dust and letters, and pretend it's noble. But what good are memories when the world demands money? Her venom burned, but I did not flinch. Memories are the root, Clarissa. Without them, money is ash. Do you think this house stands on gold alone? No, it stands on love, on sacrifice. Something you've never understood. Her hand slammed onto the table, rattling the coins I had spilled. Love does not pay debts, she snapped. The children whimpered at her shout. Little Emma clutched her brother's hand, whispering, "Why's Mummy so angry?" And in their frightened eyes, I saw the truth. Greed poisons everything it touches, even the innocence of a child's Christmas morning. Edward rose suddenly, his chair scraping back. His voice was strained, desperate, as though he were caught between two fires. "Mother, please, be reasonable. This is bigger than sentiment. Think what we could do with this. Pay off creditors, expand the estate, secure our name for generations. Isn't that what Father would have wanted?" I felt my breath catch. He dared to invoke his father, the man who had worked his hands to bone, who had lived humbly, who had saved in secret, not for vanity, but for survival. "No," I said, my voice low, sharp with grief. "Do not dare speak his name to justify your vanity. Your father left this, not to inflate your pride, but to guard against hunger, against despair. He would weep to see what you've become." Edward flinched, as though I had struck him. His face twisted. Anger, shame, sorrow, all battling at once. For a heartbeat, the boy I had known flickered in his eyes. But then Clarissa's hand found his arm, her nails digging in, and the softness vanished. Maggie, who had been silent all this time, finally stepped forward, her voice calm but dripping with calculation. "Perhaps we're all speaking too hastily. Mrs. Whitmore, Edward, Clarissa, surely the answer is simple. Entrust the box to me. I will keep it safe, oversee its distribution fairly, and ensure the children's future is secure. That way, no one need quarrel." Her words were honey, but I heard the rot beneath. I laughed, though the sound cracked with bitterness. "Fairly, you, Maggie, the stranger who now sits where I once sat, carving herself into my family's bones. No, I'd sooner cast it into the fire than place it in your hands." Her mask slipped again, just for a moment. Her eyes hardened into steel. "You're clinging to power that isn't yours anymore. You had your time, Mrs. Whitmore, but the world moves on. You can't hold on to everything forever." My chest ached with fury. "Power. Do you think this is about power? No, Maggie. This is about belonging, about family, something you will never truly be, no matter how many chairs you steal or halls you walk through as though they were yours. You are not Whitmore blood, and you never will be." The room gasped, the words echoing like thunder. Clarissa seized the moment, her voice shrill. "Edward, you can't let her speak to Maggie like this. She's delirious. She's poisoning this family with her bitterness. If she won't hand it over, then take it from her." The words fell heavy in the air. Even the children froze, their mouths open, unable to comprehend what their mother had just demanded. Edward's face went pale. He looked at me, his mother, the woman who had carried him, raised him, loved him more fiercely than life itself. Then he looked at the box, and for the first time in my life, I saw the choice in his eyes. Not love, not loyalty, but calculation. "Edward," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Do not do this." His jaw clenched. His hand twitched at his side. Clarissa's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes gleaming. Maggie stepped closer, waiting. The air burned with betrayal. I clutched the box to my chest, my frail arm shaking but unyielding. "If you touch this, Edward, if you dare raise your hand against me for gold, then you are no longer my son." The words shook the room. Even Clarissa faltered, sensing the weight of them. Edward stood frozen, torn apart, his lips trembling. His children's eyes bored into him, wide and confused. "Papa?" whispered Peter. "What's happening?" At that sound, something shifted. Edward's shoulders sagged. His face crumpled. He turned on Clarissa, his voice hoarse. "No, I can't. Not like this. Not against her." Clarissa's face twisted with rage. "You fool! Do you not see? This is our chance. Your chance. And you're letting her ruin it with her senile sentiment." But Edward collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. For once, he looked less like a man and more like the lost boy I had raised. The storm had not ended, but for that moment, I held the ground. The box was still mine, yet I knew the fire was only growing. The storm had not passed. It had only shifted. Edward sat slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands, the weight of his wife's fury pressing against his shoulders. Clarissa stood rigid beside him, her lips curled, her eyes burning with contempt for us both. Maggie, meanwhile, lingered in the shadows of the room, like a serpent waiting to strike. Her came more dangerous than Clarissa's shrillness. I still held the box to my chest, my frail arms trembling with the effort, but my will iron strong. Every breath, every beat of my heart told me the same truth. This was not yet over. The children sat silently, confused and frightened, their innocent faces the only reminder of what Christmas should have been. My heart ached for them, but my fury burned hotter for the greed that poisoned their parents. At last, Clarissa broke the silence, her voice low but shaking with rage. "Edward, look at yourself. Look at us. She's turned this house into a circus. Do you not see the manipulation? She's dangling this in front of us, watching us beg like dogs for scraps." Edward's hands fell away from his face, and his eyes, red, tired, broken, lifted toward me. "Mother, is that true?" The words cut deeper than any knife. My son, my own flesh, doubting me, manipulation, I whispered, my voice trembling with both sorrow and fire. "Do you call it manipulation to hold a mirror to your greed? Do you call it cruelty to remind you of what you once were? Edward, I raised you with love, with sacrifice. I kept this house alive when we had nothing. And now you accuse me, because I refused to feed your vanity." He flinched, but Clarissa pressed forward, relentless. "Yes, that's exactly it. You cling to your power, to your secrets, because you can't bear to let go. Well, we don't have the luxury of nostalgia, Mrs. Whitmore. The world does not care about your letters and your sentimental trinkets. We need this now." "Need?" I said, my voice rising. "Or crave. There is a difference, Clarissa. You mistake your greed for necessity. But I will not." Maggie finally moved, stepping into the light, her expression composed, her voice as smooth as polished stone. "Perhaps there's a way forward without more bitterness. Mrs. Whitmore, you say this treasure is for the family, for the children. Then why not prove it? Put it into trust, overseen by someone impartial so it cannot be wasted by anyone. Not Edward, not Clarissa, not even you." The words hung in the air. For a moment, Edward looked at her with something like relief, as though she were offering salvation. Clarissa's lips thinned, displeased at the idea of her control slipping away. And I saw the trap in her honeyed suggestion. "You mean yourself," I said quietly. Her eyes did not waver. "I mean what is best for the children, the goal of her, to cloak her hunger in the language of care." My hands tightened on the box. "You think me blind, Maggie? You think I do not see how you weave your threads into every corner of this house, how you have slowly replaced me in the kitchen, at the table, even in my son's counsel. But you will not replace me here. Not with this." Her mask cracked just for a moment. A flash of steel, cold and sharp. Then it was gone, her face serene once more. "You're tired, Mrs. Whitmore. So very tired. One way or another, you won't hold this forever." The words chilled me. There was something in her tone, not merely ambition, but warning. The fire crackled violently, sparks leaping as if the house itself bristled. The children, sensing the rising storm, began to fidget. Little Emma tugged at Edward's sleeve. "Papa, why is everyone angry? It's Christmas." Her small voice was the first note of innocence in the room, and for a fleeting second, silence fell again. Edward's face twisted with guilt, and I saw his eyes soften toward her. But Clarissa snapped her fingers sharply at the girl. "Hush, Emma. Grown-ups are talking." The harshness of her tone made the child shrink, and something inside me broke. "You dare silence her," I hissed, my voice trembling with fury. "She is the only one in this room who still remembers what Christmas means. And you, with your silks and your vanity, you silence her. Shame on you, Clarissa, shame." Clarissa's face flushed scarlet. "As how dare you?" she shrieked. "How dare I thundered. My voice echoed against the old walls, louder than it had been in years. "How dare you? You replaced me in my own house. You sneer at my age, my weakness. You see only coins where there are memories, only gold where there is love. You thought me gone already, but I am still here, and I will not be silenced." The room quaked with the weight of it. Even the children sat rigid, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Clarissa recoiled, speechless for once. Edward sank deeper into his chair, his face buried in his hands again. Maggie stood still, unreadable, her calmness more sinister than any outburst. I clutched the box tighter. My voice softened, but it carried with deadly certainty. "You all think this treasure is gold, is coin, is land. But you are wrong. It is more than that. And tomorrow you will see. Tomorrow when the house gathers again, I will reveal its true purpose. And then you will understand." The words bound them in silence. Clarissa sputtered, trying to form protest, but nothing came. Edward looked at me with haunted eyes, torn between fear and love. Maggie only tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle she had not yet solved. I rose slowly, my bones creaking, the box held firmly in my arms. Until then, this remains with me. No hand shall touch it. No word shall sway me. I am the keeper of this family's soul, and I will not falter. I left them there in the parlor, stunned, fractured, and silent. My steps echoed down the corridor, each one heavy with the ghosts of Christmases past. Upstairs, in my room, I set the box down upon the chest at the foot of my bed. The fire flickered low, shadows creeping across the walls. I sank into my chair, my heart racing, my body weary, but my spirit burned brighter than it had in years. They thought they had seen my final act. They thought the gold and the letters were the gift. But they had seen nothing yet. Tomorrow, on Christmas Day itself, I would shatter their greed in one final, devastating gift, and none of them would ever forget it. The house groaned under the weight of silence after I left the parlor. Old beams creaked. The winter wind pressed its frozen breath against the windows, and in the distance, the church bells tolled midnight. Christmas Day had begun. I sat alone in my room, the oak box resting on the chest at the foot of my bed. The fire was low, shadows bending across the walls like watchful figures. My hands shook as I poured myself a cup of tea, though I scarcely tasted it. My thoughts raced too quickly, weaving through memories, through fears, through determination. I knew this house was not safe tonight. Greed does not sleep. It prowls. It waits. It sharpens its claws in silence. And downstairs, I had seen the glint of that hunger in their eyes. Clarissa's wild, Edward's desperate, Maggie's cold and calculating. I could almost hear them even now, whispering in corners, plotting by candlelight. And I was right. At midnight, as the wind howled outside, the stairs creaked. My ears, still sharp, despite my age, caught the sound, light footsteps, careful, deliberate, not the stumbling of a child, not Edward's heavy gait. No, these were softer, quicker. Maggie's. I sat very still, my hand on the box, The footsteps stopped just outside my door. A shadow stretched across the crack beneath it, long and slender. For a long time, it lingered there, as though listening for my breath, waiting to see if I had fallen asleep. I held myself rigid, my chest rising slowly, evenly, like a corpse feigning life. The latch clicked, softly, a whisper in the dark. The door eased open, and there she was, Maggie, her hair tied back, her dressing gown tight about her, a candle in one hand, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. She stepped into my room as though it were hers. Her gaze went straight to the chest, at the foot of my bed, the box. She didn't even glance at me. I let her take 3 steps before I spoke. Couldn't wait until morning, could you? Her whole body jolted. The candle flickered dangerously. Mrs. Whitmore, she stammered, forcing a brittle smile. I was just... Spare me, I said, my voice steady though my heart thundered. You came for the box. Her mask slipped, but only slightly. She sighed, setting the candle on the dresser, and stepped closer to the chest. You don't understand. Edward won't act. Clarissa is too frantic. But this must be controlled, properly, for the sake of the house. For the children. Do not dare speak of the children, I hissed. You don't care for them. You care for the coins, for the papers, for the power it gives you. You've wormed your way into this family, into this house, but you will not worm your way into this box. Her eyes narrowed, cold as stone. You can't hold it forever. You're old, frail. Tomorrow you'll make your grand speech, and then what? Do you think you can keep them from fighting over it once you're gone? I rose slowly from my chair, my bones creaking, but my voice unyielding. That is why tomorrow I will give them more than they expect. A gift they cannot fight over. A gift that will burn their greed to ash. Her eyes flashed, suspicion and unease flickering across her face. What do you mean? I smiled, though it was thin and weary. You'll see, but know this, Maggie. Tomorrow, when the truth is revealed, you will regret ever setting foot in this house. For a moment, we stood there, staring at one another, my frail frame against her younger strength, her greed against my resolve. Then she turned sharply, snatched up her candle, and left without another word. The door shut softly, but the echo of her presence lingered. I knew she would not rest tonight. Neither would I. I sat again, my fingers tracing the lid of the box, and whispered to myself, tomorrow they will learn. The night stretched on. The house murmured in its sleep. I thought of Christmases past, the laughter of my husband, the squeals of Edward when he was a boy, the smell of pine and gingerbread, the warmth of a family untainted by greed. How far we had fallen. And yet, I would not let it end in shadows, not without one final light. When the first pale glow of dawn touched the windows, I rose. My body ached, my breath was shallow, but my spirit was fierce. I opened the box one last time and laid out its contents carefully. The letters, the photographs, the deeds, the coins, and beneath them, hidden for decades, the final envelope, sealed with wax, bearing my husband's hand. I had never shown it to anyone, not Edward, not even in his youth. It was the truest treasure of all, not of gold, but of words. His last message, written before his death, to the family he loved, and tomorrow it would be read aloud. That would be my final gift. Downstairs, I heard the house stir. The clatter of pans, Clarissa's voice sharp with orders, the children squealing with excitement for their stockings. Christmas morning had come, bright and cold. I closed the box, my hands steady at last. The day of reckoning was here. They thought they had seen the treasure. They thought the gold was the heart of it. But today, I would show them the truth. And when I did, their greed would shatter forever. The morning arrived brittle and bright, the frost clinging to the windows like silver lace. The church bells tolled, carols drifted faintly from the village square, and in my house, The air buzzed with a tension sharp enough to cut through the cheer. I dressed slowly, carefully, in my best winter shawl, a deep burgundy wool, with embroidered roses my husband had once gifted me. My hands trembled as I pinned it, not from weakness, but from the weight of the day. Today would be my last stand. When I descended the staircase, I found them all already gathered in the parlor, their faces flushed from the firelight. Clarissa hovered near the tree, her eyes darting toward the chest I carried in my arms. Edward sat stiffly in his chair, his hands clasped too tightly, his lips pressed into a thin line. Maggie perched elegantly on the sofa, her expression composed, but her eyes gleamed like a hawk waiting to strike. The children, bless them, bounced around the stockings hung by the mantel, their laughter cutting through the heavy air like chimes in a storm. They were innocent still, too innocent to understand the hunger that pulsed through their parents. "Mother," Edward said at last, rising to take the box from me. His voice was strained, as though each word cost him. "Let me carry that." I allowed it. He placed the chest upon the low table near the fire. The flames licked its brass fittings, casting golden light upon it. The very sight of the box seemed to silence the room. "Shall we begin with stockings first?" I asked gently, looking toward the children. Clarissa forced a smile. "Later, I think, we should begin with your gift, Mother. The one you promised us all." Her voice trembled beneath her composure, betraying her desperation. I nodded slowly, sinking into my chair by the fire. "Very well, but before I do, I ask one thing of you all." They leaned in, drawn by the gravity in my tone. "Promise me you will listen, truly listen, not with greed in your hearts, but with the memory of what Christmas once was in this house. Love, laughter, warmth. If you cannot remember, then at least pretend, for the sake of the children." No one spoke. The children giggled by the hearth, oblivious. Maggie folded her hands in her lap, a polite smile playing on her lips. Clarissa swallowed hard. Edward lowered his gaze. I reached for the box. The room held its breath. With slow, deliberate care, I opened the lid. The hinges groaned, as though even they knew the burden they bore. Inside, the treasures gleamed faintly. Coins, bonds, photographs, keepsakes. Clarissa gasped softly. Maggie's eyes flickered with triumph. Edward shifted uneasily, but I did not linger on the gold. Instead, I reached beneath it, my fingers brushing the worn paper of the envelope. "This," I said, holding it high, "is the final gift, written by your father, my beloved husband, before his passing. His last words to his family." The air tightened. Clarissa's lips parted in protest. Maggie leaned forward, her smile stiffening. Edward looked as though he might collapse into his chair. I broke the wax seal with trembling fingers. The crack of it echoed like a pistol shot. The children paused in their play, turning wide eyes toward me. And then, with the firelight warming my face, I began to read, "My dearest family." The words filled the room, steady and strong, despite the years. His voice seemed to rise from the paper, speaking through me, echoing in every corner of the house. "If you are hearing this, then I am no longer among you. But I leave you not with wealth, nor land, nor jewels. For such things are the shadows of fortune, easily stolen, easily wasted. What I leave you with is far greater. I leave you with the truth." Clarissa clutched her chest, her breathing quickening. Maggie's fingers dug into the fabric of her gown. Edward's shoulders sagged. "You see," I continued, "though you may believe I amassed great riches, you are mistaken. The gold you may find, the papers of deed or title, these are but trifles. They are tokens, distractions. The true inheritance is not in metal, but in memory, in love, in the bonds of blood and kindness." Maggie shifted uncomfortably. Her mask was slipping. "I entrust you," the letter went on, "to care for one another, not for wealth, for wealth corrupts, but love sustains. Should you fight, Should you betray? Should you turn against each other for coins or land? Then you have squandered my life's work. But should you hold fast to love, then you are the richest family in England. The words pierced the air like arrows. I saw it strike them each in turn. Clarissa paling, Edward trembling, Maggie biting her lip. I set the letter down on my lap, my eyes blazing with tears. Do you hear him? I whispered. Do you feel him here among us? He warned you long ago against greed. And yet, I looked at Clarissa, then Edward, then Maggie, each in turn. You let it poison you. Clarissa broke first. This is cruel, she cried, her voice shrill. He wouldn't say such things, not on Christmas. He wouldn't leave us with nothing. Edward flinched, muttering, Clarissa, enough. But she pressed on, her face blotched with rage. We've sacrificed for this family. We've earned what's ours. How dare you dangle this letter as though it were treasure? Where are the real gifts? The money? The deeds? Maggie remained silent, her jaw set, her eyes fixed coldly on me. She was calculating, even now, waiting to see what power remained to seize. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but cutting. The real gift, Clarissa, is before you. You have heard your father's truth. You may reject it, you may spit upon it, but you cannot change it. He knew even then what would happen to you all if wealth clouded your hearts. He knew. The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire. And then softly I added, but there is one more thing. Their heads jerked toward me, eyes widening with new hunger, hope flashing like lightning in a storm. I reached once more into the box. Beneath the photographs lay a small velvet pouch. I drew it out and let it rest on the table. The children gasped. Even the adults leaned forward. Inside that pouch was the only piece of true gold my husband left behind. A delicate cross, forged in his youth, worn smooth with decades of prayer. I held it up. It gleamed faintly in the firelight. This, I said, was his. He wore it every day, and he asked, in his letter, that it be given to the one among you who shows the greatest kindness. Not wealth, not cleverness, kindness. I looked at the three of them, my eyes burning with both sorrow and steel. Tell me, I whispered, which of you has earned it? The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. Clarissa bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. Edward hid his face in his hands. Maggie sat frozen, her composure cracking, though she said nothing. And in that moment, I knew. The real storm was only just beginning. The fire hissed and spat, as though it too strained against the silence that followed my question. The golden cross gleamed faintly in my hand, a fragile beacon of truth. Which of you, I asked again, has earned this? Clarissa's face flushed crimson, her lips trembling. At last, she blurted, I've managed this house, haven't I? Kept it together when Edward was too weak to decide anything. I've held the family through winters, hosted Christmas dinners, kept up appearances. Who else could claim such a thing? Her voice rose into a shriek, hysterical and desperate, but even she seemed unconvinced by her own words. Edward lifted his head slowly. His eyes were rimmed with red, his expression haunted. Appearances, Clarissa, he whispered. That's all you've ever cared about, what we look like to the neighbours. But kindness? No, you've never given kindness. Not to me, not to my mother, not even to our children. Clarissa's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her hands fluttered uselessly before she sank into the sofa, tears streaking her face. The children stared, wide-eyed, their stockings forgotten. I turned my gaze to Edward. For a moment, I dared to hope. And you, Edward, have you kindness in your heart? He swallowed, his shoulders sagging. I don't know any more, he said softly, his voice breaking. I tried to be a good man, tried to be a good son, but I failed you, Mother. I let Clarissa speak for me. I let Maggie guide me. I thought. I thought wealth would save us." His face crumpled, and he buried it in his hands again. That left only Maggie. She did not weep. She did not falter. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on mine, her voice calm, calculated. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "kindness isn't weakness. It's strategy. I've looked after Edward when he was drowning in despair. I've kept this house functioning when your daughter-in-law turned everything into chaos. I've kept order, even when you sat back and judged. If that's not kindness, then what is?" Her words were smooth, but I heard the venom beneath them. To her, kindness was nothing but another word for control. I smiled faintly, sorrowfully. "You mistake manipulation for love, my dear. You see, kindness is not something you wield. It is something you give." For the first time, her composure cracked. Her lips tightened, her brow furrowed. "You old fool," she hissed under her breath. But the children heard. Their eyes widened at the venom in her voice, and in that moment, even they understood. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, and held the cross high so that it caught the firelight. "This," I said, my voice ringing clear, "is not for any of you." Clarissa gasped. Edward's head jerked up. Maggie's face drained of color. I turned, not to them, but to the children, who stood huddled together by the hearth, their faces glowing with innocence. "It will go to them," I said firmly, "for they alone still have untainted hearts, and they will grow knowing that kindness, not greed, is the true inheritance of this house." I placed the cross gently into little James's hand, his eyes wide as saucers. He clutched it as though it were the most precious thing in the world. The room erupted. Clarissa lunged forward, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. They're children. They don't understand." Edward grasped her arm, his voice low but fierce. "Enough, Clarissa, enough!" She tore herself free, but the fight in her eyes flickered out. She slumped back, broken. Maggie rose slowly, her face pale, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. "You've destroyed everything," she spat. "Do you think this charade will last? When you're gone, they'll need me. They'll all need me. And I'll take it then, whether you like it or not." I stepped closer, my cane striking the floor with each deliberate tap. My voice dropped, but it carried like thunder. "No, you will not. Because you see, Maggie, you were never written into this house. You were a shadow, an intruder. And now, everyone sees it." Her lips parted to retort, but Edward stood suddenly, blocking her path. For the first time in years, there was fire in his eyes. "She's right," he said firmly. "You don't belong here, Maggie. You've poisoned us long enough. Leave." The words seemed to knock the breath out of her. She stared at him, stunned, then at Clarissa, who turned her face away in shame. Finally, her gaze snapped back to me, burning with hatred. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "All of you." She swept from the room, the door slamming behind her, rattling the very walls. The silence that followed was deafening, only the children's soft breathing. The crackle of the fire and Edward's quiet sobs filled the air. I sank back into my chair, my body weak, my spirit weary but resolute. "It is done," I whispered. Edward dropped to his knees before me, his head bowed. "Forgive me, Mother, please. I lost myself. I let them twist me. But I see now. I see." I placed my trembling hand on his head, tears streaming freely down my cheeks. "You are my son. I forgive you. But you must be better, Edward. For them." I nodded toward the children, who clutched the golden cross as though it were a torch in the dark. He followed my gaze, his eyes filling with new resolve. "I will," he whispered. "I swear it." Clarissa sat in silence, her face streaked with tears, her pride shattered. She did not speak, but for the first time in years, she looked not angry, not ambitious, but lost. Perhaps there was hope for her yet. Perhaps not. Time would tell. I looked around the room, at the remnants of greed scattered like ashes, and I knew my work was finished. This was my final Christmas gift. Not coins, not deeds, not jewels, but truth. I closed the box for the last time. It was lighter now, its secrets emptied, its power gone, and as the children's laughter slowly returned, as Edward sat beside them, with weary tenderness, I felt my heart grow lighter too. I had not been replaced by a stranger. Not truly. I had been tested, yes, nearly cast aside. But in the end, my voice, my love, my truth, they remained. And they would echo long after I was gone. For love endures, where greed withers, always.